Welcome to the Shepherd Heart Leader podcast, where we cover topics that help strengthen your ability to care for those under your leadership. In today's episode, Pastor Nate Ruch has a conversation with Pastor JonCarlos Velez about the dynamic relationship between the lead pastor and the worship pastor. All of us play a role in worship, so you don't want to miss this conversation.
Well, I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. I'm on this side of the mic interviewing JonCarlos Velez.
What's up?
What's up, bro? So for people that don't know or are not familiar from Emmanuel, worship pastor here at Emmanuel since
2013.
2013. And we'll unpack the broader story to that, but that's kind of unheard of in the worship pastor world, to be around one church for that long.
Oh yeah, over a decade.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Well, bravo, bro.
And counting.
That's amazing. Yes, yes. Still going.
Let's go.
TBD. To be continued.
Continued. TV.
Nah, not TBD. That's to be determined. Yeah, TBC.
Yeah, something there.
To be continued. It's going to keep coming.
Yeah.
When you look back at your life, I'm going to ask you questions about who you are. Of course, you've got a family and everything. We want that to be known here. But tell me about your journey. When did you come to know Jesus? How did this journey start?
Yeah, it's crazy. So it goes back to my little grandma, Mercedes Alvarado, short and sweet, under 5 feet. Shout out. Love you, grandma. So she would always bring us to church. Always, always. And I grew up Catholic, charismatic Catholic. So, I mean, it was like you would see worship nights happen and people just singing out in the Holy Spirit. And it was really powerful, and mass and all that stuff. And so I always grew up with this yearning of wanting to be in ministry. I just didn't know what that looked like. So fast forward, I was 12, 13 years old, and our family's like, hey, we're looking for something a little different. So we started going to an AG church, Assemblies of God church, Oak Creek Assembly of God, which is now called Discover Church. And I remember my parents were getting into that. They were getting counseling, and it was a beautiful time. And my grandma started coming. She left the Catholic church, and she started coming. She's like, I know about the Pentecostal world. And so she grew up Pentecostal. So all I remember is that I was 12 years old, and then I leaned over to my mom because I saw the pastor had his wife on the platform with him. And I said, Mom, I can get married now. That's literally what I told her. And it's crazy. And so I gave my life, I would say rededicated my life to the Lord, really, really said, Jesus, you are my Savior, at about 12 years old, and started getting involved in youth group. And we had some ups and downs, obviously, as a young kid, and growing up in the city of Milwaukee. And so a lot of my friends were not good influences, but by the grace of God, you know.
Where did music come into the picture?
Yeah, so music has always been in my life. I remember my grandpa having this old guitar just sitting in the corner of their room, and I would pick it up and I would just strum each string little by little. And I grew up, I'm very Puerto Rican, so we grew up every Christmas doing Christmas caroling called parrandas, which is like going door to door, and you got like masses of people at like 2 a.m. knocking on someone's door with like tons of instruments. And that's how I started learning, because I started learning by ear and picking up and playing maracas in the Catholic church, just always picking up an instrument. And music was always around me. I took it serious when I was 7 years old, and my dad bought me a Puerto Rican guitar called a Cuatro, and he bought it from a co-worker friend that wasn't using it. And my grandpa would sing melodies of old Puerto Rican folk songs, because he didn't play an instrument, but he could sing. And he would sing out the melodies, and I would pick it up by ear. And I started playing like that. So as we were going to the AG church, I was about 13, 14 years old. A guy asked me, Josh Olson, he said, hey man, I need a bass player for our fine arts worship team. And I heard you can play guitar. I'll show you how to play bass. So I picked up a church bass and I started playing bass. And then I started leading worship, playing bass, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow. And then you went off to North Central.
North Central University, yep. 2008. I remember Larry Bach coming with the North Central Chorale to our church at the time. And he talked to me. And he said, I want you to come with me. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. First one in my family to really go to like a university like this. And so went to North Central and then met you.
That's where we met.
Yep.
Yeah, of course, I was working there at the time. And we connected, not only you, but a bunch of your friends or friends of mine now too. And it was a really special season. Yeah. And then Gabby, how did Gabby become a part of the story here?
Man, I saw her leading worship, singing a song in youth group. Yeah. We were 13 years old.
Oh my goodness, 13.
And she was singing a special, doing it was like fine arts season for that. And I didn't go to fine arts that year, but I went the next year, 2014, to Austin, Texas. And fine arts, the National AG Youth would put on this thing called fine arts, and they still do it. That was a big part of my music development journey because it motivated me, but it also gave me the tools that I needed that the Lord would equip me to serve the church. So it lured me in, and then it kind of sent me. It was kind of cool. But I met Gabby. I saw her singing. I'm like, who is that beautiful girl? 13 years old. Then, of course, I'm Latino, so I'm like super romantic, And I met her, and I remember telling her mom when we were like 14, I said, I'm going to marry your daughter one day.
You said that then?
I said that when we were 14.
Wow.
And her mom said, to Gabby, you are no longer allowed to talk to that boy. He's way too passionate for you. But here we go, 12 years married, 3 kids later.
Oh, come on, somebody.
Yeah,
best thing to ever happen to you.
Literally the best thing. So
That's amazing. I remember when you were preparing to ask her to marry you.
I know it, yep.
And you were going to New York.
Yep, Bow Bridge.
And you were asking me what I thought about it, your plan and everything. And you worked through some obstacles to make that happen. And she said yes.
Thank God.
And then, one thing did lead to another. You were you served at a church plant at North Star, and that was cool. It was amazing.
Learned a ton. Yep.
Yeah, great pastors there, and we part of the story. I'm sure they weren't real happy with me when I gave you a call to come here. And yet they've been gracious over the years.
Oh yeah,
even in our story, and then you jumped in on our staff. What did it feel like in your first couple of years?
Man, I was 23 years old, and thinking about it as a 23-year-old, I'm like, I'm not that far off now. I'm 34. But I look back and I think, man, the decisions that I made or how I went about life or how I thought, it's crazy. And those years I would say I was driven, but I was discovering how I function within the church, how I function on a staff. Being at a church plant, it was just pretty much me and the lead pastors. Yeah. I didn't really have a team. How do I work with a team? Yeah. That was a big formative time for me during my first few years here. But it was exciting. Yeah. It was exciting because I'm like, okay, whatever I need to do.
So let's talk a little bit about this episode in particular. I think it has great value about the relationship between the worship pastor and the lead pastor.
Yeah.
And hidden within what you just talked about, there was a different feel on your previous church because of scale, context, and then you jumped into a much larger church setting where there were multiple staff people.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you were figuring out who you were, why you were leading. There actually was another worship pastor that was technically over you in authority for first few years. And you were working through how you felt about yourself, how you felt about the church, and what kept you during those years.
Man, God's grace. No, but as you were talking about that, I think, so I'm a big biker now. Thank you, Ryan Hammond and my boy Neil, who have cheered me on along the way. Looking at it now, and I realized this, and it kind of hit me. I heard this analogy be given in another sermon, but it makes sense. When you're looking at, like, watching the Tour de France, there's like a Netflix documentary that you can look at it. Teams will assign someone on the team to win. Like, you are going to win. But they ride in this group. That person that is designated to be the winner on their team is never really riding in the front until the very end. So they're riding what's called the draft. They're working 25%, 50%, sometimes even 70% less, depending on how far behind they are in a group, where they are, because people are breaking the wind for them, so they have to work less. One thing for me is that I found, if I want to go far, and if I want to win in the journey, I have to come underneath other people who have already gone before me, who are miles ahead down the road. Because there are things that I'm going to learn along the way that, hey, I don't have to go through that as hard as they did. I can actually come underneath them and learn from them. I think that was a big realization for me that I realize now that helped me. When I come underneath the authority that God has placed over me in that season, it's a lot easier. It's not always like perfect. It's not, but it's, you have this special kind of covering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And covering, we talked about this recently at a conference where we were sharing together. Covering, in 1 Corinthians 13, it talks about love covers.
Yeah.
And what does that word mean? Well, it's like the roof of a house.
Yeah.
And everything underneath the roof is protected.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the context of our staff, for example, I may be the lead, I might be the roof. Mm-hmm. And as long as people are underneath that, they get my protection and the ability to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So like, you don't have to be perfect to serve on our team. You're going to make mistakes. And the truth is I make mistakes. Mm-hmm. But I've watched you over these years. Like yeah. There's a reality that you have, even when you didn't understand the decisions I was making.
Yeah.
On the top end of the leadership of the church, because your heart was under, you were protected.
Yeah.
There's something about that. And I think it also says something about those that are under you.
Yeah.
Right? Because your heart was it didn't mean you weren't frustrated. It didn't mean you agreed with everything, but because your heart was under authority. And not just me, but at the time, your boss, Mark, was there, and he was making decisions, and you kept your heart pure underneath that. Then the people that follow you as a shepherd leader, they are also protected. And so it's not just who you're under, it's also who's under you.
Yeah.
And I always like to ask the question, what's it like to work underneath your roof?
Man.
You know, for your kids or your wife or for the people that are in your life. And that's a great principle. I've seen that to be true in your life all the way through. And that's big. That's huge. So give me a little bit your perspective on the difference between just singing songs, being a song leader, and being a worship pastor.
Man, one analogy that I like to give is a tour guide, being a tour guide. It's one thing to come and, before I go on the tour guide, it's one thing to perform, right? To come up and sing a song, and you can blow the lid off a place. You know, some people are amazing singers and they can just sing a song, and that's fine. I think there's times for that. But in the context of leading a church, especially in worship music, congregational singing, we have to function more like tour guides. I tell my worship leaders, like, hey, we're leading people down a journey, a place that God has already taken us. We've gone to that place. We've practiced these songs. We've prepared our hearts. Now it's time for us to lead the people to the place that God has taken us. If you have a tour guide that's kind of looking at the music and just singing along and just barely knowing the stuff, it's just kind of like you're not really leading people. You're not really guiding people. They're going to be as lost as you are, if not even more. They're going to be like, what's going on with this guy? But if you come and you're prepared and you're engaging the people, you're being hospitable. Your hospitality is a spiritual gift. You're setting a table. We talked a little bit about that at our conference, but As a tour guide, you're walking people along a journey to saying, man, now we're going to thank the Lord for whatever God has brought you through to today. Let's start with Thanksgiving. Let's give God thanks. Awesome. We start doing, hey, God wants to heal some people. Let's talk about the Lord's healing. Look at this marvelous miracle. We can sing songs about miracles and all that. So leading people like a tour guide in that sense, like, oh man, let's just adore the Lord and his beauty and his splendor, his majesty. Let's look at that. It's like, think about you're walking through a rainforest. Look at this awesome rainforest. You know, the water from here feeds so many else. Knowing those things, that's a big difference. Yeah. Lead people along a journey. So
yeah. You and when we're taking people from one place to another, I think we shared the illustration before of being invited over to your house, and a guest comes in, and you meet them at the door.
Yep.
And they are yet to be oriented to the rest of the house. Yeah. It's kind of a formal feeling at the beginning of the conversation. They're coming out of whatever world they've been in, and parallel to church. Yeah. People are coming from their week. They're coming into a service, and they're just getting in the door. I'm grateful for all the team Emmanuel and all the people that are part of parking lot ministry and part of the lobbies. So it's not just the person on the platform that's a guide.
Yep.
It's the whole team. And they come in, maybe they check their kids in, and but they've still got stuff inside, and maybe they're not in the quote unquote mood to worship, but they come in the door. And then as you lead in worship, or worship leaders lead, they're walking them from the lobby or the front door, maybe into the living room.
Yep.
And then they have a little bit more informal conversation. They begin to drop their guard. There's a process to it. And then, of course, the closer we get to the Lord and we forget about the things outside. Yeah. We want to get closer to Jesus. Yes. And then let's take them to the kitchen because we're going to have dinner. Yep. And we're around, and the dinner is not the message. The dinner is not necessarily the performance of a song. The dinner is intimacy with the Father. Yeah. Yeah. And we want people to get there. And one of the things that I have appreciated because of your perspective, and I trust you, is that there's the same sheep that came from the parking lot in through the lobbies into the sanctuary, and you've led them to the table, that I get up to preach, and I'm preaching to the same sheep that you've been leading. Yep. Right? So it's not that all of a sudden we're doing two separate services within a service, or that one is more important than the other. Ultimately, we want our people to meet with God. Yep. And of course, the word is a part of that. So I'm not denying the value. It's really important that I say, hey, this is what the Lord is saying through the word of God. But both of us are taking care of the same sheep. And if there's division in the relationship between the lead pastor and the worship pastor, if we're not on the same page, we don't know where we're going, or maybe you're taking them on a tour in a different direction than I'm taking them, then the sheep pay the price for that. Yep. So you're able to, because we're in sync, then when it doesn't feel like a huge left-hand turn at that moment when I come to speak, and then of course, when I'm done speaking, the last part of my message is not done. Yep. Because I'm asking the people to stand typically, and then you're leading them in worship, or any one of our worship pastors or leaders are doing this, and now they're taking what they've been on a journey with in His presence, with the Word of God and the people of God, and now they're having intimacy with the Father, and the food is a part of it. Yep. But the relationship with the Father is there, and if we're together on that, then we're both shepherding the same flock. Yep. That's so good. Yeah. It's like as you know, going off the analogy, the setting the table, it's the chef and the sous chef mentality. It's like, hey, we're serving the same people. Yes. You know, we're like the same plate. We're actually presenting the same plate. You know, a lot of the time, like, hey, you got the steak? All right, I got the potatoes. Hey, I got the vegetables. The oil's hot. You know, the pan. You know, we're talking to one another. That's why too. You know, like you've
instilled this in me. It's important to be engaged in the message, to know where to take people at the end. Where, like, it's because it is that entrustment of the handoff. You know, once you've said your final point, really, it's not your final point, as you say. It's like your final point happens when they sing this last song. You know, they come to the altar. But it's so important to be intentional, to be present in that time, to have strong communication, to be in sync. At the end of the day, I'm trying to make it easier for you to do what God has placed in your heart for the people as the lead shepherd of our flock here. You know, so just having that open communication, but that submission to saying, hey, there's something that the Lord has given my pastor. Now I need to come underneath that vision, not bring my own vision and say, well, this is what our worship set's going to be. And this is how we're going to worship. No, it's like, Pastor, how do you want your people to worship? What's the song of our church? Yeah. We'll find that together.
And we, practically speaking, we talk about that during the week.
Yep.
Like, what is that song?
Yep.
And if it doesn't work in the first service, we change it.
Yep.
Right?
Sunday, yeah.
It didn't hit the people. Yep. There has to be that conversation. And we're talking about the relationship that you and I have to have. Mm-hmm. If there's no relationship, man, that unity that is necessary for anointing is missing too. And so we have had to fight for that in our calendars to check in.
Yep.
Busyness can get in the way. I know friends in the church world where there have been moments that the relationship between the lead pastor and the worship pastor went south. And then it felt weird on Sundays, and there's tensions there. And I think we need to be like for real here.
Yeah.
It's not like everything's perfect all the time. It's not like you're always happy. Like everything's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that have frustrated you over time, either from decisions I've made or maybe peers or obstacles that are in the way. And then I have to wear more than one hat with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm both your pastor.
Yep.
Because I need to think about what's best for you and Gabby and the kids. And I am the pastor, organizationally speaking, that makes final calls on things. So when you hit the spots of frustration, and it could be about everything from time off to a teammate that's bothering you to whatever, how have you handled that? How have you brought that?
Yeah, I think establishing trust and what trust actually means. Like we're called to love everybody, but not trust everybody right away. Like that's a thing that's built over time. And I've had to remember to, okay, I'm really frustrated right now. Pastor May made this call, and I'm upset about it. I don't know how I think about it. Man, did he do that? Blah, blah, blah. And my mind starts going a million miles a second, but then I have to stop and allow trust to fill in the gap. No, we have relational equity. We have history.
Yeah.
Let me have a conversation and giving the final 10%.
Yeah, you've reached out to me.
Yeah. And you've allowed yourself to be available to that, which I think is a beautiful gift. That's amazing. So like lead pastors, I would encourage you, like make yourselves available to the people, especially a worship pastor. I don't like saying this, but it's the truth. They're the second most seen face in your congregation.
Yeah, they have a huge influence.
Huge influence. And so make yourself available to them, make the investment. That's what I would say, because I have a pastor who has made the investment. And in those moments of frustration, rather than saying, I'm going to get up and leave. First, I remember the people that the Lord's called me to lead, but I'm looking at the relationship and saying, okay, I know he means well and I know he loves me. So I'm going to let that love and trust fill in the gap and have a conversation and saying, hey, here's my final 10%. I'm thinking this. And then you do a good job. Are you processing out loud with me, or is this something that we need to handle right now? You know? So, and I'll disclaim that, but what's cool is we'll have a conversation, and not saying that we have to have answers all the time, but at least I can understand, oh, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't realize that I wasn't trying to do that, and you felt this way. And, oh, okay. Opened up my eyes to see.
Yeah, and I would say on my seat, and pastors deal with lots of problems all over, and they all come to you, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So a very human thing could be to become defensive.
Yeah.
And why is he coming at me? And what's going on here? Don't you love me? And all of that. I have to fill the gap with trust too, right? Like I have to go, no, I believe in you. I don't understand necessarily what you're saying yet. And I also know this, many worship leaders are creatives. Mm-hmm. And creatives have a different way of communicating, seeing the world. And so that means that you're just starting to talk, and what you say at the front end might not be what you're really trying to get to.
Yep.
And so I think it's Dr. Tim Rudin that says that sometimes people voice a need in the form of a complaint. And so you might be complaining about something, which I hate whining, right? So my human response might be, oh, here we go. But I need to lean in and listen for what's the need behind this.
Yeah.
What is JonCarlos feeling? What's really going on here? And that requires me asking questions without feeling threatened.
Yeah.
Or, getting big and acting like I'm the man. And what do you mean? I can't do that. I've got to give you that space to work it through. And then usually near the end, we'll probably talk, because we haven't had a lot of like confrontational stuff, but they're difficult things that we got to deal with.
Yeah.
That's what leaders do.
Yep.
Then we'll sit and we'll talk, and I'll go, okay, either can I make a decision about this now, or I'll say, hey, I'll get back to you. I need to pray about this.
Yep.
So I think from my vantage point, the most important thing for you is to be heard. Right? So it's not even necessary to have resolution to the problem right away. But if it's only bouncing around in your head, and then where it becomes really dangerous if other people on your team or other people in that world are thinking the same thing, and then somebody starts talking about it and you haven't been heard by me, now all of a sudden we've got two visions, division.
Yep.
Right? So we have to fight and contend to be on the same page and have true vision with that. You've done a really good job with that over time, and it requires the possibility that it might not work out. Mm-hmm. Like we've come to the edge a couple times where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna lose JC, and I don't own your call though. Like I honor it. I need to respect what you do, and thank God you're not just the preliminary to the message, right? Like, no, we're co-shepherds, if you will, or shepherds with all the other shepherds in our church, over the church. And we all serve the great shepherd. His name's not Nate, it's Jesus. Yeah. And so if we can function and work together, you used an analogy once where you talked about the Levites. Yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah, so in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 12, meanwhile, the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must never go out. Each morning, the priest will add fresh wood to the fire and arrange the burnt offerings on it. He will then burn the fat of the peace offerings on it. And then verse 13, it says, remember, the fire must be kept burning on the altar at all times. It must never go out. I think that brings us a great reminder. Good friend of mine, Caleb Culver, he talks about this, and he's got some incredible content, just resources about owning your Levitical calling, especially as worship pastors, worship leaders. We have a responsibility to keep the fire burning day and night. It's not just our time, and I know this sounds simple and basic, but it's not our time to worship on Sunday mornings alone. It's our time to lead people. I tell our teams that, like, hey, we're not thermometers. We're not just gauging where the people are at. We're thermostats. We have to set the temperature because we've been going out trying to find fresh wood. Hey, we gotta be diving ourselves into worship daily. Keep that fire burning. We gotta keep this fire at the altar burning, because what happens, and we can read this in Leviticus, There's like different altars. There's your personal altar, your family altar, but the corporate altar came from the fire that was cultivated day and night that the Levites were responsible taking care of. They made sure that fire never, ever went out. They were trusted by Moses to say, hey, you guys got to take care of this. Because what would happen is when when it was time for the corporate sacrifice, the fire of the Lord would just come, a big wind would come, and people would fall in amazement and awe because their sacrifice would be consumed by this wind and this fire from the Lord, from the flame that was kept burning day and night. If we're expecting a move of God, if we're expecting something to happen in our people, we have a responsibility. Hey, I want to dive in. I don't want to just sing and learn music. I want to know the word. Like I'm responsible for that. I think this is a crazy stat, by the way. It's like, I think it's 88% of American Christians get their theology from worship music.
Yeah.
Dude, if
That's
we
facts
ain't
right
going
there.
after the Lord, and if we're not going in the word, especially songwriters, that's a big deal. Like biblical literacy is at its like illiteracy is at its all-time high. It's crazy. Yeah. So going after the Lord daily, we're responsible to getting fresh wood to keep that fire burning. So when we do come together corporately, man, we can expect God to move.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then the relationship with the priesthood or the pastors.
Yes, absolutely.
Then has to be there as well. I'm not comparing myself to Aaron because he did a golden calf. So
yeah, right.
But the functions of working together are really, 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 really important, and an awareness. Now, one of the things that you do isn't just personally lead, but when our worship pastors have to work with volunteers that are also called, they have their day jobs during the week, if their teenagers are going to school or whatever, but and then they join your leadership on Sunday. So you and Audrey and Matt and Dylan and then Mallory and Anna and Heather in each of our locations, they're all working with teams of people who are not professional paid staff. They're called to come on alongside that. How do you cultivate that fire burning amongst that group of people when they're just coming in on Sunday ready to lead?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a term that you've preached on, is like workship. Encouraging them like, hey, you're coming in on Sunday and you got a crazy week of work behind you and ahead of you. But this is really bringing the sacrifice of praise to the house of the Lord. But what's going to set them apart? What are the things that are going to set them apart? So really, at me as a pastor, I'm committed to seeing them win. I'm committed to seeing their marriages win. I'm committed to seeing their kids be healthy and strong, as you've done for me, if you've modeled for me. So really, I'm shepherding that flock of people, but I'm also calling them up. I'm saying, hey, are you getting in your Bible? Like realizing that just singing songs and practicing for Sunday isn't enough. What are you really doing to dive in and say, God, what do you want to do in the people? But do it in me first. How are you going to lead people to a place that you haven't been yourself? So encouraging them to really say, hey, we have this Levitical priesthood calling upon our lives. This is an opportunity for us to lead, but it's an honor. Like I look at the Levites were always taken care of. God always took, and I see the blessing. Like I talk to volunteers, which I learned this through time. Never say no for somebody. Don't say no for them. Why would you say no for them? You could be holding them back from inheriting a blessing. And I've learned this along the way. And I've actually been kind of like rebuked by some of my volunteers. Like, hey, you're busy. Yeah, I get it. You got a lot of kids and work is nuts. We're going to give you some time off. They're like, why would you say no for me? Right. This is a blessing. This actually helps me be a better dad, a better mom,
It's a part of using their gifts.
It's a part of using their gifts, but also they're receiving this blessing from God to saying, I'm giving you a strength out of your weakness that only the Holy Spirit can give. So, I mean, it's an ebb and a flow. It's really leading people and calling them, say, hey, I want you to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And having relationship is a part of all of leadership in the church.
100%,
Not just doing things for, if people are just checking a box and doing a task on Sunday morning, but there's nothing involved in the spiritual relational component.
Yep.
Hanging out, doing those kind of things. And then, of course, that is not necessarily known by a congregation on a Sunday, but they can feel something.
Yeah.
So, I would encourage anybody that's listening to pray for your worship ministry and pray for the people involved. And you face spiritual warfare for the work that you do and the calling that God has on your life. And because I know we face it in our family and our lives. And so, but the high praises of God are how we fight our battles, right? This is, so it stands to reason that if we can beat the enemy with our praise and our worship, that the enemy would try to starve us or distort something or bring in confusion or fatigue or anything else. So, I think you do a good job of cultivating the relational side of things, and so does our rest of our team. We're really working hard to make sure we stay on the same page. We're aware of each other's needs.
Well, one thing too to remember, the Levites were a tribe, and the tribe sticks together.
That's good.
But also in the tribe, it's not just one person doing all the work.
Yeah.
It's you're entrusting others to do another job or to fulfill this so that we can all move as one unit together. And that's really important. And that happens through relationship, through accountability, through building trust. Open the final 10%, all that. So it's a lot to go with.
Hey, real quick, before we're done here, being a house of prayer for all nations is a really big deal for Emmanuel. And of course, we have multiple language groups and lots of different ethnicities in our congregation in each of our locations. How does that all play out with worship?
Man, it's crazy. And I'd say that's an ebb and a flow, and it's an ongoing journey too. But representation matters, like seeing yourself on the platform as a congregation, just seeing and it's not just, I'm not just talking like racially, like skin color. I'm talking about generationally too. Like we're not just like the cool young worship team up there. Like we got grandparents that are up there leading with us, and that's important.
Right, along with 8th graders.
Yeah, and it's so diverse in that side of things as well. But I would say, a big thing for me is like, do you hear yourself in the worship? Can you hear your voice in the worship? Because really at the end of the day, our job as worship musicians is to get out of the way so that you can lift your voice unto the Lord. So really picking songs that encourage the body to say, hey, would you lift your voice in this moment? I'll do ad-libs in Spanish because I want our Spanish speakers to understand, oh, we've been singing this song in English, but this is what it means. Great. I'm going to do that. I've been jamming out. I was just telling you earlier to some Afro beats worship that just gets me dancing and going. And we have a lot of African nationals in our congregation, and we can pick things from every people group and saying, man, worship that way. Yeah, that's amazing. We got to get up and dance and move, like dance like David, but like sing with a passion, but also, hey, let's have this moment of silence before the Lord. So there's things that we can pick up from other people groups that the Lord has entrusted us with at our church and saying, okay, now how do we take all of that and be hospitable? How do we set the table? Yeah. Hey, we could have arroz con gandule right here, next to steak and pierogies, we'll have it all, man. Like, come home.
Oh, that's
meet with
good.
Jesus. Yeah.
I remember the night that we did our recent recording and then Watch and See song. In fact, I got the sweatshirt on that you guys put out.
Represent. Yeah.
And we did that song.
Yeah.
And then you did it in Spanish.
Yeah.
Was that like planned out?
That was not.
Really?
That was not planned.
It was like, because it was just natural.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a moment because, for me, I grew up, I was born and raised in Milwaukee, but very culturally Puerto Rican, and Spanish was, singing out in Spanish, it just hits something. It brings me to a different place with the Lord, I think. It's a simple thing, but I just go there. And that song was actually written originally in Portuguese, wrote it with some Brazilian writers in Nashville, Tennessee at Integrity. And we started going into English and Spanish with that. So there were like kind of broken translations of Spanish in it, but we finished it in English. So it was already kind of in me, but I was like, I'm just going to do it. It may not be the original or the official translation of it, but I did it, and our church latched onto that.
That was an amazing night. I mean, you could feel the presence of God. I remember when the recording was released, it was right a year ago.
Yeah.
While we were in Israel, Jody and I were with a team from Emmanuel, and we were driving into Jerusalem.
Wow.
As that song was playing.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, I got tears running down my face, and it's powerful how even what is done in one moment, you can feel the presence of God later on.
Yeah.
All of our Emmanuel Live albums have that potential if people listen. If you haven't, any of our listeners here, if you have never heard our Emmanuel Live worship, it's really fun. How do people find that?
Every major streaming platform. So you can find stuff on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Google Play. It's out there. And we want to be a resource to the church. So on multitracks.com, all of our instrumental tracks, rehearsal tracks are available on there. We have most of our songs on Song Select CCLI as well for the worship leaders listening in. But if you're like, hey, I need help finding stuff, feel free to reach out to us, worship@emmanuelcc.org. Worship@emmanuelcc.org. It goes to pretty much everybody in our worship department, and somebody will help you out.
Well, Pastor JonCarlos, thank you for taking the time for us. That we could go for hours, right?
I know it.
And maybe we'll circle back and do this again, but thank you so much.
Thank you. It's an honor. Love you.
Wow, such a great conversation. I love to hear how those two work together and interact. You can even hear it in their conversation. Now, they mentioned a lot of great resources, so we would love for you to be able to have access to those resources, so I'll leave them in the description. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and share this episode with others. And until next time, keep leading well.